Welcome to Out Motorsports, the channel for cars as you are. My name is Jake and I am here with a very divisive vehicle this week. This is the 2022 Subaru WRX. This is the fifth iteration of Subaru's rally-inspired turbocharged all-wheel drive sports sedan, and perhaps nothing else that I've seen recently has generated so much chatter among enthusiasts as the new WRX. It has a lot of body cladding, it is built on a platform shared with some crossovers, and it comes with a CVT, thankfully, as optional. That's not everything, so let's get into what this 2022 WRX is, and then let's get it on the road and see how it actually is to drive. So starting up front here, what is the 2022 Subaru WRX? Like I said, this is on a platform shared with some crossovers because for this fifth generation, Subaru has moved it to the Subaru Global Platform, which is basically something that a lot of automakers are doing these days. One or two platforms for all of their model lineup. It is much more flexible than what a lot of automakers could do several decades prior. So is it a bad thing? No, not necessarily, because this chassis, Subaru claims, is 28% stiffer than the outgoing fourth gen model. Now, what that does mean is that yes, technically the new WRX is on a platform shared with things like the Subaru Outback, but it doesn't necessarily matter if it's good to drive. We'll get into that in just a second. As far as some numbers that matter, as far as what is under the hood and how it all flows down to the ground, every 2022 WRX has been upgraded to have a 2.4 liter turbocharged flat 4. This is still a boxer motor like in every other Subaru, but it makes more power and more torque, makes 276 horsepower and 259 pound-feet. And that is, of course, turbocharged. The turbo makes about 12 pounds of boost at its peak. There is a nice little gauge on the dashboard that shows you what you're doing for peak boost when you're driving. I also mentioned this car has a CVT optional, thankfully. This is the second iteration of WRX that can have a CVT. Blessedly, the one that I'm driving has a 6-speed, 3-pedal manual transmission. That is still the standard transmission on every trim level of WRX except one of them. Get into that in just a second, but 6-speed manual standard. Subaru is calling their CVT in this car for the 5th gen WRX the SPT, the Subaru Performance Transmission. And it is called that because it has quicker upshifts and downshifts between fixed ratios, which is amusing to me because a CVT's inherent benefit is that it doesn't have fixed ratios, but no one likes CVTs, so then we're building in fixed ratios to make them feel like torque converter automatics, and this is a whole rant that I could get on, but we're not going to, because point being, this one has a 6-speed manual. Now, I mentioned the 6-speed is standard across the board. It is, unless you want the top trim level, which is called the WRX GT. And that gives you a few extra options that we'll talk about here, but you have to have the SPT, the CVT, with it. Now, whether you get the 6-speed manual or the Subaru Performance Transmission, everything flows down to all four wheels via standard all-wheel drive. That, of course, has been a Subaru hallmark at this point for decades and decades. They've kept it here. It is, of course, standard. Now, the torque split on the all-wheel drive will be different based on the transmission that you get. In this case, given this car has the 6-speed manual transmission, the torque split is 50-50 front to rear. Now, the final piece of what's up front here is the steering rack. Subaru has installed a dual pinion electronic power steering setup that gives you better feel, quicker response, and more accuracy in your steering, so they say. Does it work or not? Well, we'll get into that in just a second with the driving portion. Before we do, let's come around back and talk a little bit more about the exterior of this WRX. And moving around back here, the reason I brought you back here is to talk about something that is perhaps the most divisive about the whole car, and that is the styling. Subaru has changed the styling of this WRX. I'm not going to say that really any of the WRXs have been lookers per se, although I think all of us have our favorite iterations of body style. None of them might be considered classically pretty, but they've always been acceptable to some, and in this case, this one's been very divisive, and that is because there's a ton of plastic body cladding all over the car. Subaru says that that kind of goes back to this car's rally heritage, even though the early cars never had a lot of body cladding in the first place. The most egregious body cladding that you can find is on the back bumper. There's a lot of black plastic going on back here. plus the wheel arches and the front bumper and a couple other places. Now, if nothing else, there are a lot of vents and scoops cut into the body cladding, and Subaru does say that they are functional, so that they do help with downforce, they help with aero, and if nothing else, as enthusiasts, we should care that they are actually functional ducting and venting and all that good stuff, because too many manufacturers do vents that are just vents to nowhere. So if nothing else, thank you Subaru for giving us some functional aero and some ductwork in here. Now, I mentioned that topmost WRX GT trim being the top tier of WRX that you have to get with the Subaru Performance Transmission, aka the CVT. And you might be missing out on a couple things if you don't get that trim, and it's kind of a bummer that Subaru has locked you into getting the CVT with that trim level, because first of all, you get adaptive dampers, so you get shock absorbers that can be firmer or softer based on the drive mode settings that you select. And yes, drive mode settings, Subaru only in the WRX GT gives you a drive mode selector that they call SI Drive. We've seen that in prior WRXs and STIs in the past. In this case, you only get it if you get the WRX GT. And then finally, that third thing that you get with the GT package is a set of Recaro seats up front. Now, I don't necessarily think the regular seats here are bad by any means, but it's just such a bummer that Subaru only gives you the three most performance-oriented options that you could have if you get a CVT in your performance sedan. I know CVTs have kind of been a Subaru thing for a while. Love them or hate them, they're again very divisive, and I just wish you could at least offer that with the 6-speed like they do with the rest of these trim levels. But that is neither here nor there. This car is not a GT, this is a limited, so this is top tier right below the GT. It's got everything else, all the other goodies. Let's do a quick interior tour, and then we'll get it on the road and see how it is to drive. All right, so let's take a look inside this 2022 Subaru WRX. This is a new interior, of course, for the new car, for the 5th generation. Some people have asked if I thought this interior was a little too austere, and I don't think that's the case. I mean, it's certainly pretty simple in here, but Subarus are not luxury cars. They're not saying that they are, and I think this is plenty nice for what it is. So first of all, you've got your steering wheel here. This has your controls for your music over here, your phone. This is for your multifunction display, and then this is for your cruise control. You'll notice a couple of button blanks here, and that is because this car, being the 6-speed manual, you can see there, doesn't get the full EyeSight driver assistance suite. So this is just regular cruise control, not adaptive. Kind of a bummer, because I think other manufacturers can make their adaptive cruise work with a stick shift. Subaru just hasn't done it here. Looking over to the left of the wheel, you've got a nice big vent. You can see the dash is kind of soft touch here with some red stitching. Further down, again, some button blanks, trunk opener, stability control, and your lighting for your gauges. These seats, like I mentioned, are not the Recaros. I think these are plenty fine. They're kind of a mix of this suede-like, microfiber-like material, and then some leathery, vinyl-y, whatever going on down the sides here. They are relatively aggressively bolstered for being the factory base model, if you will, seat. And in this case, they are power adjustable here. You've got lumbar that's just in and out. It does not go up and down. So this is power adjustable on this side, and then I believe it is manually adjustable on the passenger side. Moving into the car, let's take a look here. You've got your nice big Starlink screen. If I go ahead and turn this on. Now, this is Subaru's 11.6-inch Starlink screen. It is generally a pretty good system. It has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto via cord, not wireless. Pretty decently snappy and easy to use. It's very simple, just kind of goes along with Subaru's keep it simple mantra. The only thing I don't love is that down here there is a dedicated space for your climate control. There are some hard buttons for your temperature, for your defrost, but to turn on the heated seats, this is such a petty complaint, but to turn on the heated seats, you must tap and then wait for a screen to load and then tap again. And that can just be a little bit of a pain if you're moving and you're at speed, you want to turn on the heated seats. Otherwise, Apple CarPlay takes up this whole big centerpiece, which is kind of nice, and then you can still have your track playing up there, which I appreciate. Moving a little further down here, you can see you've got a couple of USB ports, 2 of them right here. They're both USB-A, an auxiliary input, and then you've got just a regular power outlet down here. Looking further back, of course, hip hip hooray, this is your 6-speed manual transmission shifter. Pretty easy, typical 6-speed. You pull up and then it's over and back for reverse, just like that. You still have a traditional parking brake here to go with your 6-speed manual, which again, I love. And then it's pretty simple over here, just a little storage compartment, 2 cup holders, and then you've got your little cubby there. Again, simple over here on the passenger side. All you've got is your glove box, which nice and large. And then your door panels do have some space for water bottles and things over here. And then looking further up above, no pano roof, which is fine. I'm not here to complain about it. Just a regular sunroof. Again, nice and simple. Now looking over here, I did want to point out, you'll notice I've got push button start, which is great. The button's right here. There's also the trip odometer reset button right here. I cannot tell you how many times I've gone to start this car and went for the trip button, not the start-stop button. This is something that if you own the car, you would get used to. Me only being in it for a week, have not gotten used to it yet. And then finally, let's take a look at the gauge cluster here, see how close in I can get. This is a pretty simple gauge cluster. Again, I appreciate the simplicity. I don't feel the need for everything to be giant screens. I like the fact that Subaru has kind of kept it simple. So you've got real gauges for your tach and your speedometer and your coolant and fuel level. The only thing that changes is the center multifunction display. You can move through a bunch of different settings here as far as what you want to show. Show a couple more things when the car is actually on. This, of course, is off at the moment. But pretty simple in here. Like I said, I like the simplicity. Not everyone does. Some people want a little more tech, and I think if you want a little more tech, you know, Subaru may not be the people for you in every case, but they're not trying to be. They're trying to keep things, again, fairly simple and just be good at what they are and who they are. So with all that, let's talk about how this 2022 Subaru WRX with the 6-speed manual is to drive. All right, so driving the 2022 WRX. First things first, because this is the stick shift, let's talk about how good or not it is. Thankfully, I think Subaru has done a nice job with the transmission in this car. The shifter has some really good feel to it. It's easy to get in gear. It's not rubbery. It's not too notchy. Really nice shifter in general here. As far as how it pairs to your clutch action and the feel there, it's a pretty easy clutch. It's not too heavy, not too light. It's very Cinderella pedal going on. I like that. Makes it easy in traffic, but it's not so light that there's kind of nothing to it. It doesn't feel like a video game shifter. So really nice analog feel with the transmission setup going on, which is kind of the whole point of keeping the 6-speed around versus just going with only a CVT. Really like that. As far as the ride quality, it is good to very good if you're on well-paved roads. The road I'm on now has been repaved, you know, sometime in the last few years. It is pretty well kept, and I think the ride quality is pretty good. However, if you end up in the city where things are not as well kept, things quickly change to being a little too stiff. That's not a problem because, you know, this one in particular does not have adjustable dampers. It's got fixed damping rates, fixed spring rates, and that's okay with me because Subaru had to make a decision. They wanted to, you know, make a decision between the car riding a little softer at the expense of handling or make it be a little firmer at the expense of ultimate comfort in every scenario. And they chose the latter. And I think that's okay because where you can tell this car does excel is with the amount of grip that it has. This is on some Michelin All Seasons, so nothing too crazy. This is on an 18-inch wheel, given this is one of the top trim levels. The base cars come on a 17 with a slightly narrower tire, but this is a 245 millimeter tire. I think it's enough tire for the chassis between the power and the weight. The curb weight of this car is at most, with the 6-speed, about 3,300 pounds. So not all bad, but you know, as far as grip-wise, you can feel it through a corner, you can feel it through an off-ramp. It's got a lot of grip to give. Where the grip thing kind of falls apart for me is with the steering. I know Subaru has this new fancy steering rack in here. It is not a steering rack that I necessarily like. The feel is kind of light, and truly there's not a lot of communication going on. One of my friends said, you know, your grumpy ex communicated better than this, and that's not a compliment. It really just does not quite tell you much about where the front wheels are going at any given time, and it's easily the biggest letdown of the car, because the car otherwise, for me, I think is pretty good for what it is. So the steering is really kind of a bummer here. Now, as far as the other big thing, that is the power of the engine, like I said, 2.4 liter flat four turbocharged. It is more power than torque. Peak power comes in a little bit above 5,000 RPM, and the red line is at 6,100, and you will easily hit the fuel cut because the power kind of swells as you grow toward that red line. Your peak torque comes in at 2,000 RPM and goes all the way to about 5K. So around town, you can, you know, keep it in that rev range and feel pretty good. But if you put your foot into it, it does not feel the quickest, just because of how it makes that power and delivers that power. That's not to say it's a slow car. You know, your 0 to 60 time is plenty competitive, and your power to weight ratio is in the 12s, which is plenty quick. But it's not, something about the way it delivers power is, it's a little interesting to me, and the fun part is that, you know, around town, this doesn't feel like anything too special. Not to rag on how Subaru did this, but it just, you know, it just feels like a car with a stick shift. If you can keep the power above like 3,500, you've still got some rev range to play with, but that's where it starts to come alive a little bit more and feel a little bit more like, you know, eager puppy dog ready to pounce at any given moment. So it is a bit of an old school driving experience, which I do like. Power delivery wise, I wish there was just a few more revs left in it when it started making all that power and swelling. Even if it was another 500 RPM, it is a little too easy to hit fuel cut in this car, and you'll find yourself you know, bouncing off the limiter there. And then the final pedal that we haven't talked about yet is the one in the middle. That is the brake pedal. And I think the overall braking system in this car feels good. The pads and the pedal feel have nice initial bite, nice progressive feel as you get deeper into the pedal a little bit. Nothing really noteworthy or constructive to say about the brakes on this car in particular. And then the final piece of all of this is the cabin and the visibility. Like I said, the cabin is fairly simple, which is okay. It's kind of a Subaru hallmark to be more of a simple car. I like that. And I actually really, you know, I'm okay with everything going on. I wish there was another interior color, just because all black can be a little dour. Thankfully, you get some light from the sunroof. But beyond that, the dash is nice and low in here, which is something that you don't really see a lot. A lot of newer cars have felt very bathtubby to me, and thankfully Subaru has kept this nice and low. Between the dash, the door sills, everything is fairly low. You've got really good visibility looking forward. You've got these little side windows in front of the actual windows that roll down, which kind of help contribute to that feeling of great visibility. You've got, you know, the ability to see your corners, which is really nice for the sake of more precision driving if you are, let's say, autocrossing this car or on a back road in this car. Something like that is very helpful. When you look toward the rear of the car, of course, you do have some big pillars for your C-pillar, but that's kind of standard and, you know, still not too bad. The overall body lines don't sweep up so much on the rear doors that you can't see out the back of them. So again, overall visibility in here is really good. We'll see how many beans we can give it here getting on the interstate. Not sure how traffic's looking here, but you can also hear the exhaust. The exhaust is not too loud, not too quiet. It can be a little boomy depending on what rev range you're in, but That engine sounds pretty good. It is certainly plenty quick. Again, you just have to keep it kind of on the boil when you're accelerating. And just be willing to rev it. And, you know, understand you're going to be shifting a lot to keep it in that happy rev range, and that's okay. It just means, you know, you're getting that analog connection to the car. You're getting a little bit of a workout with your right arm, but that's kind of what you want when you're buying the stick shift version of the car, right? As far as this overall package, I like the WRX. I can't say I've fallen in love with it, and that is mostly because of the steering. I think the steering really needs a little more feel than what it's got for me to say that this is a confidence-inspiring, fun car in the corners. It has a ton of grip, but having grip and being fun and being confidence-inspiring are three distinctly different things, and it's missing one of the three. Granted, it is still a good performer overall. I think it's a nice package overall, and you know, the whole ethos of Subaru and the WRX in particular has been affordable, all-wheel drive, fun sports sedan. So is this that? Yes, it is. If you need all-wheel drive in something that's this package size and shape at this price point, this is kind of your option, and it's not a bad one. Having better steering would make this a little bit of an easier sell for me. All right, and that is it for this review of the 2022 Subaru WRX 6-speed. Thank you so much for coming along. As always, please be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe right here on YouTube. You can also give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Out Motorsports. And if you'd like to connect with other LGBT automotive enthusiasts and motorsports competitors, come on over to outmotorsports.com. We have a whole community over there, and we would love to have you join us. Till next time, please stay safe, be well, see you for the next one.